So this week's presentation, it's going to be the Week 12 lecture, Common Errors from the Week 12 Final Draft. So in previous classes, students have made the following errors in their Week 12 Final Draft. They made mistakes in APA citation, essay structure, sentence structure, comma usage. They used too many cliches, apostrophe usage, and not knowing the difference between colon versus semicolon. If you have questions about how to write your final draft, we can go over your paper together, so you can always email me with questions. What? Another presentation on errors? Why? Why again? You're giving us another presentation on errors? You just gave us a presentation in the Week 11 lecture. Why another presentation on comma usage and errors again? Well, because I'm seeing the same errors over and over again. So I feel that I have to do another presentation since students keep making the same mistakes. I will stop doing these presentations when nobody makes any mistakes in their paper. I want to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes again because I care that you all write good papers. So on to today's lecture on the Week 12 Final Draft Errors. And as I go over these errors, you just make sure that you don't make the same errors in your Week 12 Final Draft. So let's go over common APA errors in the Week 12 Final Draft. When we use an in-text citation, we place author, date, page number after we cite an author word per word to give the author credit for his research. When we use APA, we cite numbers, historical, factual, scientific, medical, numerical, and statistical facts. Here's an example of a direct quote. In California, 70% of adults have had at least one shot of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. CDC 2021. So if there is no author name, use the website name instead. In a reference citation, you write out the entire citation at the end of your paper, so readers have a list of your sources. And so in a reference citation, you have the author name, last name, first name, date, article name, publication, date you received, website, then you write your web address. Example, CDC. So I used CDC because there was no author name. So if there's no author name, you can write out the website name. So Centers for Disease Control, 2021. Then you write your article name, percentage of people vaccinated in California. Then you write the publication, which can also be the website name, Center for Disease Control. Then you write the date in which you retrieved the website. So retrieved June 28, 2021 from www.cdc.org. How do I find sources for my paper? Yes, you can use Google to search for credible sources as long as you use CAPAL, currency, author, purpose, objectivity, and writing purpose, to ascertain if the source that you're looking at is a credible source. So I went over this in the Week 10 lecture, in which I went over how to evaluate credible sources. Currency means how current is the article. If the article is older than 10 years, then it's no longer credible. Author. Is the article written by an expert? Purpose. Is the article an ad? Is it to get you to buy a product? If so, then it is not a credible source. However, if the purpose of the article is to educate you, and it's based on facts, such as a .org, .edu, or a .gov website, then you know that the purpose is not an ad, and therefore it is a credible source. Objectivity. You have to make sure that it's not biased and that they talk about both sides of the issue and that it's professional. Writing purpose. You have to make sure that it's got a thesis statement and no grammar errors. So I posted several sources for you to use. Just take a look at the Week 11 forum. And so how you find sources by you type in your topic in the search engine, use Kapow to find credible sources for your hits, then find an in-text citation that fits your paper. Remember that for your essay 2 comparison contrast essay, you have to have at least one APA in-text citation and one APA reference citation, and that your in-text citation has to match your reference citation. And that the in-text citation is in the body of the paper, while the reference citation is at the end of the paper. So when we use APA, we cite medical facts. So here's an example of a medical fact. Influenza, commonly known as the flu, and COVID-19 are both contagious diseases. They are considered viruses and not bacterial infections. Bacterial infections can be cured by antibiotics, which the only way to determine if you need will be to have a blood or urine test done. These tests are called culture tests to identify whether you have a bacterial infection or a virus. Viruses are smaller than bacteria. A virus needs to attach itself to cells to survive. Bacteria do not need a host. And so then, after you write this medical fact, then you have to cite the source. So where did you get this medical fact from? CDC, and then that's the author name is CDC, and then 2021. More medical facts. So yeah, cite. So this is another example of. So this was actually a medical fact done in somebody's paper, and they forgot to cite the fact. So you need to put in the author's name and the date. So for best hygienic practice, leftovers are stored properly and reused at the earliest time. Foods are not cross-contaminated or left open and unattended for an extended period to allow flying insects to feast on. Uncooked foods are stored in smaller portions and used quickly to prevent spoilage. Insect-infested and expired foods are thrown out to prevent health complications. And then you need to cite. You need to cite the fact, not medical fact, so you need to cite the author and the date so that the reader knows where you got this medical fact from and that you didn't just make it up off the top of your head. Cite APA when citing time, speed, and quantity. Facebook has more posts that go viral than Twitter. Twitter has more users worldwide than Facebook. Twitter lets you connect with users instantly worldwide. Cite uncommon knowledge. Facebook is quicker to block you than Twitter, which gives you more freedom of speech on Twitter. So Smith 2020. Twitter has news that is legitimate, while Facebook has more fake news. Then you have to cite uncommon knowledge. All of these examples come from student papers, just so you know. Facebook is popular with older users, while Twitter is more popular with younger users. And so here you got to cite, when dealing with demographic trends, you have to cite the source. Use pie structure. Do not use one statistic after another in your essay. You will overwhelm the reader with too much information. Use pie structure to increase the originality of your paragraphs. So use P, main point from thesis. I, in-text citation of less than 3 words. E, explain that in-text citation in your own words in 5 sentences. So here you have an example of a quotation. It's way too long. Okay, the transmission is similar. It can spread by contact and droplets. The same preventable measures such as hand hygiene and coughing into your elbow all can be done to prevent the spread of the infection. COVID and influenza have similar symptoms. They both cause respiratory disease. COVID is more aggressive with how it attacks the lungs. COVID symptoms can range from asymptomatic or mild to severe or even death. People with these symptoms may have flu or COVID-19, chills, cough, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, fatigue, muscle or body aches, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. COVID-specific symptoms are fever, dry cough, and fatigue, shortness of breath, loss of taste or smell. Use a block quotation for quotes longer than 3 lines. Use APA for numbers, dollars, and statistics. The average salary for an agency nurse is $31.97 per hour. So when you're using all of these numbers and dollars and statistics, then you have to tell me where you got these numbers from. What's wrong with this reference citation? It's missing the author name, it's missing the date, it's missing the article name, it's missing publication name, it's missing the date that you retrieved the website. So this is a common error not only in the Week 11 forum, but also in someone's Week 12 final draft. So you're supposed to correct this. By the time you get to the final draft, you're not supposed to be missing parts to your reference citation. And so some people have also, other people, when I go over and grade the Week 12 final drafts, I sometimes find the same mistakes. That's why I find myself repeating myself, because the Week 11 common errors, my presentation I did in Week 11, in which I talk about the most common errors from the Week 11 forum, sometimes are the same errors when I go over the Week 12 final draft errors. Because some people just simply upload the same thing over and over again. So I end up correcting the same thing over and over again. So what is wrong with this reference citation? Do we need links inside a reference citation besides the web address? What about the author name? What is wrong with the author name? So basically what's wrong with this one is you need to put the last name first. So you have to go Reeks Marla and Traholtz Amanda. And then Traholtz Amanda C. And then you would write in, then you write the article name, and this is missing the article name. And then you write in the date that you retrieved the website, and it's missing that. And then you write your web address. So it's missing a lot of parts. Yeah, I still get things that look like this. Don't just send me your web addresses. This is a common error that I saw in the Week 9 forum, the Week 11 forum, and now the Week 12 final draft, in which I mentioned the same thing in the Week 11, when I went over the Week 11 presentation, APA errors. People typically would just send me their web addresses, and that's wrong. So when you write a reference citation, you have to have the author name, the date, the article name, publication name, and the date you retrieved the website. Same thing here, okay? The person also made mistakes and didn't write it in the right order. You always write the author name first, then you write the date, then you write the article name, publication name, and then the date you retrieved the website. The Week 12 final draft common grammar errors. So the rest of this lecture is going to talk about common grammar errors that I found in the Week 12 final draft, which also is pretty much the same errors I found in the Week 11 forum and in the Week 9 forum and going back to the Week 5 forum. And so people consistently make the same grammar errors, despite the fact that we went over all of these grammar rules in the Week 3, Week 5, Week 7, Week 1, 3, 5, 7 grammar quizzes. So you need to learn to apply the grammar rules that you reviewed in the grammar quizzes into your papers. Avoid sentence fragments. Here are some sentence fragments I saw in student papers. We studied this in the Week 7 quiz, so that whenever you have a dependent clause, which is great, what I see, who you know, which in my opinion makes it harder to eat naturally. These are all dependent clauses because each of these sentences start with a subordinating conjunction, which, what, and who is a relative clause. So we never start a sentence with a relative clause or a subordinating conjunction, because you just end up with sentence fragments. And so if you still are having sentence fragments, you need to restudy the sentence structure rules that we went over for the week 7 quiz. Here you have even more sentence fragments because no need to buy gas. Who are we talking about? So this is missing a subject. Even have leftovers for dinner. Once again, who are we talking about? Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Or Mr. and Mr. Jones? Who are we talking about? So here you have sentence fragments where the subject is missing. Commonly confused words. I can't drive too far because the car is out of gas. So I think you meant to write as in T-O-O, not T-O. And here the person meant I was accepted, not accepted, to the University of Phoenix. John is taller than Mary, T-H-A-N. I lose money? You mean I lose money, L-O-S-E. The Capitol was on fire. You mean capital with the O, not the capital with an A, because capital with an A means big A as opposed to little a. Okay. So here the capital is, and then this person made the opposite mistake. This should be capital A, and this should be O-L, this should be A-L. Okay? So when you want to write about a letter, then you use A-L, and if you're talking about the capital as in Washington, D.C., it's O-L. I passed my test. Oh, you mean P-A-S-S-E-D, my test. He's always thinking about the past. Oh, you mean P-A-S-T, as in future, past, and right now. So you need to use spell check. Oh, and sometimes spell check will not catch these kind of mistakes because spell check does not capture word usage. Okay, these are all word usage mistakes. So you need to know the difference between to and to. Okay, accepted versus accepted. So you need to study the commonly confused words, or you have a commonly confused words list next to you so that you can make sure that you wrote your essay correctly. Or you can have somebody look it over for you. Use a comma after an introductory phrase. And so the introductory phrase here is, as an adult, comma, you may have goals you want to achieve. And so this sentence is missing a comma after the introductory phrase. So this is the week 5 quiz in which we went over everything punctuation. Use a comma after a reduced adjective clause. So you would say, growing up, comma, I had no adult responsibilities. While I was growing up, comma, I had no real adult responsibilities. So when a dependent clause comes in at the beginning of the sentence, then you have to have a comma. And so I think that's the week 7 quiz, in case you're wondering, that you need to go over. During my childhood, comma, I remember coming home from school and running outside to play with friends. So use a comma when a prepositional phrase starts a sentence. Here is the same thing. When a dependent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, you need a comma over here. So when I was a child, comma, I used to go out and play with my friends. Use apostrophe S to show possession. And so restaurants are always messing up. You need apostrophe S, people's orders. So the answer is B. Use apostrophe to show possession, also referred to as man's best friend. So you can tell that I got all of these examples from people's papers, okay? So this person wrote about cats are better than dogs, or dogs are better than cats, one of those. So she forgot to put in an apostrophe whenever you show possession. Use transition words instead of but all the time. And so this particular student kept saying but. She actually, right before I cut and paste her, into this PowerPoint, she had already used a lot of buts. So I remember telling her in her feedback, you need to use more transition words of opposition. And And I mentioned this before in your week 11. Because I know that if you watched both the week 11 and now you're watching week 12, you're going to be like, you went over this already. You sound like the same. And I go, that's because everybody keeps making the same mistakes. And I end up talking like I'm a broken record. And I give kudos to you who actually sat through both the week 11 lecture and this lecture, because the more times you go over these grammar rules, the more you will remember. Practice makes perfect. And grammar is anything but fun. You know, it can be quite tedious. And therefore, the only way to really learn grammar, besides practice, is just to do a lot of reading. The more you read, the better you write. And I don't mean reading social media. I mean reading a book as a classic, reading literature or War and Peace, or something long and something from. So reading many books really it will improve your writing. So here the student, instead of using but all the time, you should use a transition word of opposition, like however. Use a comma after a transition word. So here, you're supposed to say, in summary, comma, Shaggy is the superior character because he is the bravest and most realistic member and takes care of Scooby-Doo. Avoid cliches. In other words, when you write a paper, a cliche is an overused expression. That it's an expression that's been used so many times that it's lost meaning, you know. And if you use too many cliches, you sound too conversational. When we write in formal English, we want to avoid cliches. And I'm going to do a video on what is a cliche. So I will upload that as soon as I finish this week 12, so that you can know what a cliche is and to avoid it. So a couple of examples of cliches is, do not get me wrong, friends are good to have, but they are one in a million. And so instead of using do not get me wrong, forget it. You would just say friends are good to have because they are very precious. And so find a way to say it in formal English, or just explain what you mean in plain English, minus the cliches. And then you're going to find that when you're more specific in your paper, then you will have a much better sounding professional paper. It's like there's nothing like kicking back. Okay, find another way to say it. In other words, I love to relax during the weekends. Sounds much better and less conversational than there's nothing like kicking back. Here's some more examples of cliches. Now books and movies can sometimes give us the same stories, but they can be viewed differently, like apples to oranges. Okay, like apples to oranges is a cliche. So you would write, but they can be viewed differently because books give a more complete story, while movies are a visual interpretation of the book. So you cannot compare the two since they are both different art forms. Now that sounds much more professional than like apples to oranges, which is what she meant if you read the rest of her paper. Last but not least, children's fun time is effortless. So instead of saying last but not least, which is a cliche, you would just simply say in addition, or instead, or use a transition word of addition. Okay, so transition words of addition are all different ways of saying and. You could also use transition words of summary, such as in conclusion, children's fun time is effortless. So when you avoid cliches, then your paper sounds less conversational and more objective. Since the beginning of time, there has always been a debate on whether books or movies are better. So there's several mistakes. Okay, here, for example, she forgot to put in there, typo, forgot to put in a T, and then here she forgot to put in her comma. So whenever a prepositional phrase starts a sentence, you need to put a comma there. So that's what's missing. Always put a comma when the prepositional phrase is at the beginning of the sentence. This one is a very first grade mistake. You need to capitalize. Okay, capitalize the first word of every sentence. What is wrong with this week 12 final draft? There are two famous beverage companies, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, have competed dramatically and distributed the beverage market profit for several decades. In the free market, it is hard to exactly tell which one is the winner within the perfect competition because both companies use different types of commercials. Personally, I believe that Coca-Cola earns higher profit than Pepsi because Coca-Cola has better marketing strategies and the representatives for their commercials and TV ads is lower. I would choose to drink Coke over Pepsi because Coke has fair marketing strategy that attracts all generations of people, whereas Pepsi targets mostly younger generation. Therefore, we should drink Coke that knows how to appreciate all audiences. So, where are the 5 paragraphs? Okay, so remember that you have to indent 5 spaces and then double space, because this was someone's actual entire final draft. There was no, in other words, she didn't bother to put in any paragraphs. She didn't bother to double space. And then this person got a very low grade. Okay, this is like an F. Okay, you don't want to get an F by not having paragraphs, not having any APA formatting. So you got to remember that paragraphs is every 5 to 7 sentences. And you have to have 5 paragraphs for your week 12 final draft. And then some people just write me their thesis statement as the very first sentence, and then they're missing the 5 sentences on top of the thesis. So here, she's missing, she wrote her thesis, excellent thesis, but she forgot to write the 5 sentences on top of it, so she got points off. She also forgot to replace you and your with a person in order to sound less conversational and more Now you need to use semicolons to separate sentences in a thesis statement. And when you use a semicolon, this is a semicolon. So semicolon joins together similar sounding sentences. And when you join the similar sounding sentences together with a semicolon, it becomes one sentence. And so even though there are many sentences joined together, like 4 or 5 of them, this is not a complete paragraph. This is still counts as one sentence. You still need to have 5 other sentences on top of this one. So that is a very common mistake because people think that these sentences that are separated by semicolons are separate sentences. But when you use a semicolon, then you make this entire sentence one connected sentence because semicolon actually means and. It is a shorthand for and. And so and it also has good parallel structure. So you need to use semicolons when you are writing your thesis statement. So you can write your 3 reasons, and those 3 reasons become your body paragraphs. In this one, the mistake is she has no APA at all, because when we use numbers and when we use dates and when we do any kind of numbers, you have to have APA. Number 2, she has way too many APAs, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And you should avoid having too many of them in a row. Okay, limit yourself to just one APA in-text citation per paragraph. Overall, cats are more chill than dogs. You have 3 errors in this sentence. So here you have number 1, you need to have a comma after overall, because overall is a transition word. Then you have the second mistake, than, okay? Than dogs, not then dogs. And the third mistake is we don't use cliches in dogs. Cats are more chill than, that's like how people talk. And when we write an academic paper, we do not want to sound like the way we talk. We don't want to write the way we talk. Now, apostrophes. And so many students, I'm doing a whole lesson in this presentation on how to use the apostrophes because there were so many apostrophe mistakes in people's final drafts. And so which of these apostrophes are used correctly? Bob's car just broke down. There are 3 Bobs in my class. Bob's my favorite uncle. The ping pong ball bobs up and down. The dog wagged its tail. It's a good day for a walk. Any of these correct? Yeah, it's this one. Bob's car just broke down. So when we use an apostrophe, we are showing possession. So whose car is it? It's Bob's car. And then here, there are 3 Bobs in my class. And so if you have a plural noun, you don't need an apostrophe. And then here, it's also correct. Bob's my favorite uncle. So here you would have Bob's. Bob is. And so another way in which we use an apostrophe is to show contractions. So Bob's my favorite uncle means Bob is my favorite uncle. So that's correct. The ping pong ball bobs up and down. And so here, the ping pong ball is a singular subject, and then bobs is a verb. And so singular subject takes a singular verb, and therefore verbs don't have apostrophe. Well, this particular verb doesn't have an apostrophe because it's an action verb. It's not a contraction. And so singular, this is a subject-verb agreement with a singular subject, ball, takes singular verb, bobs, B-O-B-S, period, and no apostrophe. Here, the dog wagged its tail, and so here we don't use an apostrophe S because this is a possessive pronoun. So when you have a possessive pronoun, it's yours, his, ours, theirs. We don't use apostrophes. So this should be the dog wagged its tail minus the apostrophe. And in this one, you do need an apostrophe because the apostrophe is used for possession and it's used for contractions. Like, it is a good day for a walk. So you need to write the apostrophe. So I know that sounds really confusing, but this is this is how we use apostrophes when we are in contractions. So apostrophes are used to show possession, and it's used to show contractions. So, isn't becomes is not, hasn't becomes has not, there becomes they are, we're is we are, your is you are. So here you have many examples of how the apostrophe is used in a contraction. And apostrophes are used to show possession. So here you have the dog's leash. The dog's, multiple dogs, leash. So if you're going to use an apostrophe, let's say you have someone's name that ends in S. Jess's desk. Then you would have J-E-S-S, and then the apostrophe would come after the S. Or any word that ends already in S, just like plural dogs. So let's go over this. The rules about forming possessives probably cause the most apostrophe confusion. They vary a bit depending on what type of noun you are making into a possessive. Here are the rules of thumb. For most singular nouns, add apostrophe S. The dog's leash, the writer's desk, the planet's atmosphere. For most plural nouns, add only an apostrophe. The dog's leash, the writer's desk, the planet's atmospheres. For plural nouns that do not end in S, add apostrophe S. The children's toys, the geese's migration route. Style guides vary in their recommendations on what to do when you have a singular proper noun that ends in S. Some recommend adding only an apostrophe. Charles Dickens novels. Kansas's main airport. Others say to add an apostrophe S. No matter which style guide you use, only the apostrophe to plural proper nouns that end in S. Or add only the apostrophe to plural proper nouns that end in S. Harris's house and Smith's vacation. Use whichever style matches the style guide you use for your writing. If you don't have a style guide, it's okay to just pick one of these methods as long as you don't switch back and forth. And if you have two people that own something, then you would say Bob and Jim's Bake Shop, or Bob and Jim's Bake Shops. So that's how you would do it if two people. Robert and Mary's book, not Rob's and Mary's book. So that's how you would do it for. Do not use apostrophes with possessive pronouns. I was just saying the dog wags its tail. So my, your, his, her, its, our, their, whose. And so here you don't have an apostrophe S for a possessive pronoun. Do not use apostrophes with plural nouns. So 3 oranges, so you don't need to have an apostrophe. Using an unnecessary apostrophe to form the plural of a noun is a very common mistake. Sometimes it's called the grocer's apostrophe because of how frequently it is spotted in grocery store adverts. So 3 oranges for $1, don't do it. With very few exceptions, apostrophes do not make the nouns plural. The one notable exception is the plural form of lowercase letters, which are formed with an apostrophe to prevent misreading. So you can't say oranges apostrophe S. You have to say oranges. Okay. So always remember that when you have a plural noun, no apostrophe. So that's a very common mistake. So the people's voice, the children's toys. So we use apostrophe S when we are doing a possession. And then if the words end in S, you can put the apostrophe after the word. The 60s was a fun decade. The 70s was fun. I remember the 70s. Don't remember the 60s, but I remember my mother wearing mini skirts, and she looked really cool in the mini skirts and the high boots. And that's coming back. It's all retro. So knowledge check. Which of these is correct? Okay, how would you? So I'll give you a few minutes to try to figure out which sentences are correct and which sentences are wrong. So here, this one is missing an apostrophe. I borrowed Ringo's apostrophe S drums. 3 apples and 2 pears. So when you have plural, no apostrophe. That little red Corvette, is it hers? It's mine. Okay, so here, it is mine. So therefore, if it's a contraction, then you need to have apostrophe. That kitten is afraid of its own tail. That's correct. Yay, there's one sentence in here that's correct, because here you have a possessive pronoun. Okay, and we don't have an apostrophe after a possessive pronoun. The dog's tail wags a lot. So here you have an apostrophe S. Whose tail is it? It's the dog's tail. The 2 dogs wag a lot. The 2 dogs' tail wags a lot. And so here, that's correct. The people's voice is heard when they vote. So here is correct. The children's toy. Okay, so here you need the children apostrophe S. Toys were put away. So week 12 final draft. So mistakes in colons, dashes, and semicolons. So a colon lists things about to happen. Dan has 3 items on his table: a pencil, a pen, and his computer. So when we want to list things, then we use a colon. A semicolon separates sentences in your thesis statement. In other words, it means and. A dash is less formal and just means that more conversation, more information is forthcoming. And it also emphasizes, it's like an emphasis of what's upcoming. So you would say, hey mom, I've got good news. And then dash, I got an A on my math. So it's like an emphasis. A colon tells the reader that more information is coming. So the king dined with some of his... In other words, when you have a colon, it means that you're listing things, okay? So the king dined with some of his pals tonight. And then list. You list who it was that he dined with. The Duke of Earl, Count No Count, and Baron Wasteland. That's very funny. But anyway, and so when you have a colon, it's a list of things. Like a colon, a long dash tells the reader that more information is coming. The dash does so in a less formal, more dramatic way. Santa will be late this year, children. And then dash. The elves are on strike. Hold on, don't touch that dial. So it's much more dramatic, less formal. And a semicolon separates sentences. And sometimes they separate items on a list. Sometimes they separate clauses of a sentence. If you are separating clauses, the words on both sides of the semicolon should be closely related to each other, and each clause must be able to stand on its own as a complete sentence. So we use semicolons to separate clauses that are closely related, just like with your thesis statement. Childhood is better than adulthood because as a child I could play all day, semicolon. I had no jobs, semicolon, and I did not have to pay the bills. So that's how you would write the, that's how you would use the semicolon, because semicolon is like and. Hold on, don't touch that dial. Okay, here you would use a dash because this is informal and more information's coming. I see what you did there. You frightened a mouse under the chair. And so here you could, it's up to you. You could either use a colon or a dash. Okay, it depends on whether you want to be formal or not. But I get the feeling this is more of a colon. This one, don't touch that dial. When it's dramatic like that, we use a dash. I went to Rome last month, and then you can use either a colon or a dash. It really depends on whether you want to be formal or informal. Here's something you may be interested in. A large barrel full of pictures. Or if you want to say, if you're excited, you would put a dash. But if you're like, you're not that excited, then you put a colon. This one I gave as the example. Clark ran to the phone booth and ripped off his glasses, dash, and then Superman came flying out. So dash is always very dramatic. And in this one, when you have similar clauses, first, empty the dishwasher. And then you have your semicolon, which is what you use for your thesis statement. Then scrub the floor, semicolon. Then fix the lawnmower. So here, I hope I did this right. Okay, so let's see. Hold on, and then you have dash because that's for something dramatic. I see what you did there, and yeah, I was right. Here you would have a colon because this is more formal. I went to Rome last month, semicolon. This could be either one, all three of them, if you ask me. Here's something you may be interested in. And then here you would have a colon. So, week 12 final draft, comma usage mistakes. Okay, why? Another presentation on comma usage? Well, I'm still seeing comma usage errors in your week 12 final draft. And most importantly, students keep asking me for more comma usage. So here it is. So here are the more common mistakes that I see in the week 12 final draft comma usage. Use a comma after an introductory phrase. Use commas after a parenthetical phrase. Use a comma when a coordinating conjunction is in a compound sentence. Use a comma to separate items in a series. And use a comma before dialogue after the word say or reply. So is it a comma or a coma? Okay, this was one of those jokes. It's a grammar joke. So here are some mistakes when these were in actual publications where someone made a mistake without either leaving out a comma or not putting in a comma, and then it changes the entire. Rachel Ray finds inspiration in cooking her family and her dog. Oh, so she's going to go put her daughter and her dog into a pan and cook them? No. So that's missing. Rachel Ray finds inspiration in cooking, comma, her family, comma, and her dog. So when you don't put in the commas, it changes the meaning. A fashion tip for the party. Don't wear black people. What? You're not going to wear actual people? No, it's supposed to be don't wear black, comma, people. A sign on a store bathroom. Attention, toilet only for disabled, elderly, pregnant children. Oh, so you're going to have children that are pregnant, elderly, and disabled all at the same time? How is it that a child can be elderly and pregnant at the same time? So that means that when you don't put commas, then everything becomes an adjective. All of these words become an adjective for the noun children. That's not what this person meant. So if you put a comma, or we use a comma in a list, so toilets only for disabled, comma, elderly, comma, pregnant, comma, children. Okay, so this, if you put a comma in there, then all of these words are no longer adjectives for children. We have 2 hours to kill someone, comes to see us. No, we have 2 hours to kill, comma, someone come to see us. Stop clubbing baby seals. So here you would say, where would you put it? You know, so stop clubbing baby seals, or stop clubbing baby seals. So anyway, this one, let's eat grandma. No, it's got to be let's eat grandma. So you got to put a comma over here. Same thing, time to eat. Children, you're not actually going to eat children. Before he joined the army, Melvin was a snob. And so, what are the rules? What comma rules are needed for reading these sentences? So when you read these sentences, okay, what comma rule occurs over here? So when a dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence, then you put a comma there. Here we use a comma when we're listing things. Here we use a comma after we say she said, after a dialogue, and before you have the quotation marks. But I'm a vampire, comma, he replied. So anytime it's before replied and before said. You paddled your canoe to Nebraska. And all here you need a comma when the coordinating conjunction is between two sentences, complete sentences. Here you need a comma when you have a relative clause at the beginning of a sentence. It's like an appositive. And here, Shakespeare's most famous play, comma, The Empire Strikes Back, was written in 1980. And so here, when the appositive comes at the end of the sentence, you only need one comma, but if the appositive comes at the beginning of the sentence, you need two commas. I can't remember which quiz that was. I think that was week 3. Week 3 or week 5, something like that. You paddled your canoe to Nebraska, and I bicycled to Hawaii. So when you look at that, what rule is it? It's use a comma when fanboys is in a compound sentence. The alien dog, which had green fur, wagged its tail. So here you use two commas when which is at the beginning of a sentence. In other words, when the appositive or when the adjective clause is at the beginning of the sentence, we use two commas. If the adjective clause is at the end of the sentence, we use only one comma. And then here we use a comma in dialogue. We always use a comma when you go, she said, and then comma, I love you, and then I am a vampire, comma, said Robert. So always before or after said, we use a comma in dialogue. We always use a comma after an introductory phrase. An introductory phrase is a subordinating phrase or dependent clause. Use a comma when a dependent clause is at the beginning of a sentence. A dependent clause always starts with a subordinating conjunction. You should Google subordinating conjunction lists to get your own list, to create your own dependent clauses for your complex sentences. Introductory phrases also sets the stage for the main action of the sentence. They are not complete. They're not a complete thought. And so common introductory phrases include prepositional phrases, appositive phrases, participial phrases, infinitive phrases, and absolute phrases. So I'm going to go over each and every one of these. Next to the barn. So here, prepositional phrases, when the prepositional phrase, which shows time and place, is at the beginning of a sentence, we use a comma. Next to the barn. The chicken coop is filled with eggs. Across the street, comma. John saw an accident. Under the table, comma. My desktop has a lot of dust on it. And a positive is a adjective phrase that describes the noun. Normally, and a positive is a reduced adjective phrase. What I mean by that is normally we would say Edison, who is the inventor of the light bulb. Okay, and who is the adjective phrase, adjective clause that describes Edison. It describes who he is. And then sometimes you can take out the who and the is. That's known as a reduced adjective clause. And once you reduce the adjective clause, it's known as an appositive. Either way, you have to use two commas when an adjective clause or a reduced adjective clause is at the beginning of a sentence. Edison. So what is an appositive? An appositive is an adjective clause. It's a clause that modifies the noun. That's basically it. And a relative clause is used to combine two simple sentences together that has the same subject. Remember we did that in sentence revision, where I talked about many different ways in which you can connect your simple sentences together. And one of the ways in which you can connect your simple sentences together is by using who, which, and that. So instead of saying Edison is often called the world's greatest inventor. Edison is the inventor of the light bulb. So instead of saying Edison, you use who, in order to combine the two simple sentences together. And therefore, when you have the first adjective clause, that is an appositive, and then you have two commas. I hope that makes sense to you. Appositives give a variety to your sentences. So you instead of saying Jim Gold is a professional magician, Jim Gold performed at my sister's birthday party. So one way to combine these sentences is to turn the first sentence into an adjective phrase. So when you have two of the same subjects, then you can use an adjective phrase to combine the two sentences. So here, Jim Gold, who is a professional magician, performed at my sister's birthday party. And then you can even take out the who and the is. And then you would say, Jim Gold, a professional magician, performed at my sister's birthday party. Either way, when you have an adjective clause at the beginning of a sentence, or a reduced adjective clause known as an appositive at the beginning of a sentence, you need to use two commas. So appositives are reduced adjective phrases, clauses, and they are formed when you take away the to be verb. So here's some more examples of reduced adjective clauses. And reduced adjective clauses evolved through time because people, it was understood who you're talking about. And so in conversation, people started to take away the who and the is, and they would just say John, a professional magician, instead of saying John, who is a professional magician. So if you study linguistics, it's interesting how English evolves and how conversation, people want to shorten what they're saying. That's how contractions came about, because people are too lazy to say he is, so they say he's. Anyway, that's a different topic. Crying because of a low grade, John needed comfort. Jan was eating a burrito when the earthquake struck. While eating a burrito, Jan was scared when the earthquake struck. And so here you would combine two different sentences. While Jan was eating a burrito, and so you just combine these. So instead of having Jan was eating a burrito, the earthquake struck, you combine the two sentences together with an adjective clause, and that's how you do it. Same thing with this one. Jack, who is fluent in French, lives in Paris. Fluent in French, Jack lives in France. So so when you use appositives and adjective clauses, when you have two subjects that are the same, then you cut down on the number of simple sentences in your paper, and therefore your paper does not sound so choppy. A positive is a noun or pronoun that renames or identifies another pronoun or noun in some way. And a positive phrase, that's what we were just going over. It's a reduced adjective clause. Now, you can have some appositives do not need a comma. And if an essential appositive if it's essential, if the adjective clause is essential to the meaning of the sentence, it does not need a comma. Okay? So if you have to have that adjective clause in that sentence, then don't use a comma. If that appositive is just extra information, then you have to use the two commas. Okay? So I actually had a student ask me how you use commas in appositive phrases. And that's how you do it. Okay, so if it's really essential, you add it. If it's not essential, you don't. So if it's not essential to the meaning of the sentence, then it needs commas. So let's go back to, let's see if I can do this correctly. Ooh, isn't that cool? Yeah, this is the one that just came before it. So here you have architect Frank Lloyd Wright designed many buildings, including New York's Guggenheim Museum. Frank Lloyd Wright is the apostrophe phrase. It identifies architect. And so you need to know who is Frank Lloyd Wright. And so here you need to know that he's an architect, so we don't put any commas. Okay. Margaret Mitchell's novel, Gone with the Wind, won the Pulitzer Prize in 1937 and was made into a movie in 1939. And so you need to know what the novel is, so therefore you don't use a comma. So these are all examples. Artist Georgia O'Keeffe famously painted many images of flowers. And so Georgia O'Keeffe, who is an artist, so you need to know who you're talking about. So if it's essential to the meaning, you don't need a comma. If it's non-essential, like Babe Ruth, everybody knows who Babe Ruth is, a baseball player with the New York Yankees. Okay, then you can put in commas, meaning that it's supplemental, and you don't really need to, don't really need the comma. What is a participial phrase? A participial phrase is when you have, you take away the is. He was brimming with confidence. Jack blurted the answer. Okay, so here when you have two simple sentences, like Jack was brimming with confidence. Jack blurted the answer. So Jack. So when you have two sentences with the same subject, okay, you can combine the two subjects together, the two sentences together by creating a participial phrase. So you take away the he was, and then you just go brimming with confidence. Jack blurted the answer. Okay, let me repeat that. So let's say you have two sentences. He was brimming with confidence. That's sentence number one. He blurted the answer. So we take out the he was, okay, especially when we're talking about Jack and Jack. So we just say, brimming with confidence, Jack blurted the answer. So that's how you use a participial phrase to combine the two subjects together, because we're all talking about Jack. Okay? Another one, you take out the girl. So normally you would have the girl who was dancing in the rain is the one I have a crush on. So you take out the who and the was, and you say the girl dancing in the rain is the one I have a crush on. Instead of having two sentences, the girl is dancing in the rain, the girl is the one I have a crush on, you combine the two sentences together by using a reduced adjective clause. That's all this is. It's just reduced adjective clauses. And you just take away the who and the is, and then you have yourself a participial phrase. Here are some examples of infinitive phrases. So an infinitive phrase starts with an infinitive. To get a driver's license, comma, you need to pass the driver's test. So when the infinitive phrase is at the beginning of the sentence, okay, you need a comma. To be rich, you need to have a job with a generous salary. So remember that if you use an infinitive phrase, which is an introductory phrase, at the beginning of a sentence, you need a comma. Absolute phrases are used to combine two clauses that have different subjects. The visitors left, we went to bed. The visitors left, we went to bed. Oh, the visitors having left, we went to bed. This is very rare, okay? And it's very formal English, and also I think it sounds very British. But yes, this is another way in which you can combine two sentences together. Now remember to use a comma after an introductory phrase. So according to Wilbur, comma, good friends who write well are not easy to find. Or if you want to become successful, comma, you have to study hard. So always use a comma when a dependent clause is at the beginning of the sentence, just like if you want to become successful, and you put a comma there. And then if you have an introductory phrase at the beginning of the sentence, you use a comma. So here are more examples of introductory phrases. Okay, so with only $10 in his pocket, John tries to buy a week's worth of groceries. So this is a prepositional phrase, and then when a prepositional phrase, which shows time and place, comes at the beginning of the sentence, then you have to use a comma. So at the store, time and place. That's at the store. John realizes he has too little money. And also use a comma after a transition word. Therefore, comma, a kind old man bought John his groceries for him. And then when a positive phrase is at the beginning of a sentence, you also should use a comma when it starts the sentence. And use a comma when you are using, this I've already done already, is when you have a positive, okay, Jean-Pierre, who is a Frenchman, okay, or a reduced adjective clause. So when the reduced adjective clause is at the beginning of the sentence, we use two commas. And we also use a comma when we have fanboys. So John is smart, but Mary is smarter. Okay, so here you have, when you have fanboys, before but, for, and but, for, nor, so, and but, for, nor, so, yet. And when those coordinating conjunctions combine two sentences, you have to have, this I know is week 7 quiz. When I went over the three kinds of sentences, simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. And this is a compound sentence. So when fanboys is between two sentences, you gotta put in a comma. Do not use commas between compound verbs. Oh, that's true. So if I have, be careful not to use a comma to separate two verbs that belong to one subject. So Dean switched the lamp on and off and then tapped it with his fingers. The Ferris wheel started and Wilson closed his eyes. Mary left, but the band played on. So the comma is optional when the complete thoughts are short. This one is differs from teacher to teacher. Most teachers still, that's why they say optional. Most teachers still insist that if you have for, nor, so, but, yet, you still have to have a comma there. So that different teachers debate. But to be on the safe side, every time you see fanboys, you always use a comma when it's between two sentences. That's easier to remember. So here you've got more fanboys, you know, yet, but, or, for, yet. So Janet likes salad, comma, but John likes salad. Oh, they both like salad. Oh well, then you could say John and Janet likes salad. Okay, this whole thing doesn't make sense. I meant to say Janet likes salad, but John likes steak. Okay, otherwise this sentence can be rewritten completely differently. But my main point is, when you have two sentences and you have fanboys, put a comma there. When you have fanboys like or, put a comma there. Okay, so for and nor, but, nor yet so. See, that was a mistake. So also you use commas when you have items in a series, like inhale, exhale, and relax. So when you have different action verbs, or when you have different adjectives. Micah wore a pale green tuxedo. Then you would have to put a comma between pale green. Okay. Use commas to separate items in a series. The other animals in the farmyard, the cat, the geese, and the sheep, are amazed at Charlotte's masterful plan to save Wilbur. Or, I like chocolate ice cream, garlic bread, tofu, and hot dogs, all at the same time when I was pregnant. That's a whole nother. So, when you have different items, like chocolate ice cream, then you have to have a comma, garlic bread, then you gotta have a comma, tofu, then you gotta have a comma. So when you're listing items in a series, you would use a comma. Otherwise, you end up with this bathroom is for pregnant, disabled children. When they meant to have this bathroom is for disabled, comma, elderly, comma, pregnant, comma, and children. So that the comma will signify that each one is a separate item and not all together. Use a comma with direct quotations. So here's the same thing. Here, the carnival barker cried, comma, step right up and win a prize. So right before and right after a dialogue, you have to have a comma. So always use a comma before a dialogue. Steve said, comma, we need more wood for the fireplace. John replied, comma, okay, I will go outside to cut up more wood. Steve said, I am grateful for your help. John replied, nice to help out the older folks since one day I will be old too. Use a comma when a dependent clause starts a sentence. Okay, this we've already gone over many times. And definitely use a comma after, once again, when a dependent clause or an introductory phrase is at the beginning of a sentence. And use a comma after introductory adverbs. An adverb is any word that ends in ly. Finally, comma, I went running. Unsurprisingly, I saw a duck when I went running. So any word that starts with ly is an adverb. And if the adverb is at the beginning of the sentence, you have to put a comma. Usually, comma, I get up at 7 a.m. in the morning in order to do my work, for example. Here you have also use a comma to separate elements in a full date, weekday, month, and day and year. Also separate a combination of those elements from the rest of the sentence. So this is talking about March 15th, comma. And so here you need to put a comma for dates. This is for American dates. I think that internationally it's done differently, but for American, because in America it's month, day, and year. And in Europe it's day, month, and year. Use commas in numbers of 4 digits or more. Okay, this you should already know. This is mathematics. I'm not going to go over this. Use a comma when you have yes and no. Yes, I saw a duck when I went running. So you use a comma after yes. No, the duck didn't bite me. So you use a comma after no. use a comma before a dialogue. So here, right here is the comma. Another clever meme shows the problem with incorrect placement. Stop clubbing baby seals. Reads like an order to desist harming infant mammals of the seal variety. The version with a comma, however, instructs them to stop attending hip dance clubs. Stop clubbing baby seals. So, there you go. Use a comma between two adjectives that modify the same thing. I saw the mean big duck. Yeah, this I went over already. Sentences with non-coordinate adjectives don't require a comma. I lay under the powerful summer sun. So powerful describes summer sun as a whole phrase. This often occurs with adjunct nouns. Oh, I see. Okay. So use a comma to offset a negation. I saw a duck, not a baby seal, when I went running. In this case, you still need the comma if the negation occurs at the end of the sentence. I saw a baby seal, comma, not a duck. Also use commas when any distinct shift occurs in the sentence or thought process. The cloud looked like an animal, comma, perhaps a baby seal. And around words that interrupt the flow of thought, so use a comma. The hallway, dingy and dark, was illuminated by a bare bulb. And then we use commas after every three numbers. That's it. Okay. We're done with this entire lecture. Finally! Oh my god, that was a long lecture. Okay. So, we use commas for these are the main reasons or rules for using commas. Items in a series, after an introductory material, around words that interrupt the flow of thought, between complete thoughts, in a direct quotation. That's it. And so this is more of a, you could do it on your own on how we would do all of the knowledge checks. So that's it. This is the very last lecture that I'm giving on grammar. It's a really long one. And that was an hour and 12 minutes of grammar. Yeah. Well, luckily this class is ending in just a few days, so that's it. You just have to remember to apply everything that I've tried to teach you in your quizzes, and you're going to write perfect papers. So if you have any questions,